Next up, we have anatomy of the spinal cord. So we're going to take a look at the spinal cord kind of in cross section and do a quick review of the major sections of this spinal cord. So while the picture here is vertebrae, what runs down through these vertebrae is the actual spinal cord, or those neurons and that nerve tissue that supplies movement and other activity to the rest of the body. I just wanted to review the major sections because the vertebrae names match the names for the sections of the spinal cord. So remember that section in your neck is referred to as the cervical vertebrae. Well, the spinal cord that runs through there is called the cervical spinal cord, or the cervical nerves if they're coming off the spinal cord in that region. In the chest region, we have the vertebrae named the thoracic vertebrae. And so the spinal cord, as it runs through those vertebrae, and any of the nerves coming out there are referred to as the thoracic spinal cord and the thoracic nerves. In the low back, we have our lumbar vertebrae. And so the spinal cord does end in this portion, but any nerves running through there are referred to as the lumbar nerves. Okay, kind of between the pelvis, we did have the sacrum. And so any nerves that start to run off of there are referred to as the sacral nerves. And last we had the tailbone, which was referred to as the coccyx. All right, so those nerves that run out there are referred to as coccygeal nerves. Okay, so this picture here on the right, well, I've given you the picture on the left that shows you the main subdivisions. And if you remember that from our bones and those divisions, it's again the name of the spinal cord. What I'm showing here is that this brown portion is the vertebrae itself. And that nice little dark gray and light gray portion that sits in the middle with a circle around it is the spinal cord itself. And it's really important that we're going to take a look at this in cross section. But what's happening is it's running down through the center of those vertebrae, because I mentioned this in a previous video, but if you damage the spinal cord, it is one of the few places in your body where you cannot regrow or reheal a lot of the major damage. And so what we want to do is give it a lot of protection. So this protection comes in the form of that vertebrae and the spinal cord running down through the center of it. So you really have to go through quite a bit of bone and damage in order to get to the spinal cord itself that runs down through the center. All right, so now I'm just pulling out the spinal cord portion so that we can look at the different components. So first up in the center, we have white matter and we have gray matter. And so white matter appears to be this very white, almost like off-white. It looks like two butterfly wings through the center. And it's surrounded by this darker gray color, which is referred to as the gray matter. And really, we just call it the white matter because it appears to be lighter or more white, and the gray matter in real life appears to be quite a bit darker when looked at underneath the microscope. There are different things that run through each of those sections, but that is not for a med term class, but that is the white matter versus the gray matter. There is this teal blue that surrounds it, and so around the spinal cord and around the brain, there is a layer of fluid protection that surrounds both of them. So in addition to having bone that protects the spinal cord and bone that protects the brain in the form of the skull, between the bone on the outside and the actual nervous system of the spinal cord of the brain, we have this fluid called CSF, which is a new abbreviation for us. So I'm now presenting another abbreviation, and it stands for Cerebrospinal Fluid. And so it really, again, surrounds the brain and the spinal cord and provides us extra cushioning so that we do not create damage to structures that don't heal themselves very well. To hold that fluid in, both around the brain and the spinal cord, we have this layered tissue that is pretty tough, okay, that holds it in, and we refer to that tissues as the meninges. Okay, so imagine this nice little tissue that's holding that fluid in and close around the brain and the spinal cord. That is the meninges, okay, portion or tissue that surrounds those structures. Coming off of the spinal cord, you can see the start of some nerves or some neurons. And one comes off the back portion, and I've referred to it as the dorsal root because the term dorsal means to be towards the back. And there's a portion that comes off of the front, and that is called the ventral root because ventral means to be towards the front. And again, we do a video talking about these directional terms. They very quickly join together and it creates this little bit of a widened bump, and I've exaggerated it here a little bit, but that is called the dorsal root ganglion, that little bump. And then that travels out of the vertebrae and out of your body as a nerve.